All right, hello out there, and welcome to my channel. We do educational videos that focus on delving into great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, magnum opuses, tour de forces, earth-shattering discoveries, generally from obscure sources and things that you can hang your hat on, things that you can believe in, and because they can be verified. And that's usually what we present are things that you can check. You can check and see whether this makes sense. So we try to present the evidence. But if that's not enough for you, then you can go and look at it yourself in full detail. But we generally read a lot of text all the way through with a little bit of commentary from me. I do summarize some things sometimes as well. But today is our 206th video on the unit called the Reciprocal Church, where we're amassing spiritual resources, different things that you can use in your own life to enhance your spiritual life, especially in light of the impending collapse of the Western religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, all due to fraud. But in particular, we've been focusing on the New Testament and how it was written in its entirety by the Roman Caesars and their immediate family, and primarily coming from the Flavian dynasty, Vespasian and Titus from 69 to 81 AD, possibly Domitian, who ruled after Titus, his brother, from 81 to 96 AD, but I don't think Domitian was in on it at this point, but not sure. And then later on, some of the other emperors presided while this guy named Arius Calpurnius Piso wrote the entire Bible, entire New Testament, with help from his family members, which include 4 of his sons, a couple of his grandsons, and also Pliny the Younger, who was also an in-law, a grandson-in-law, I believe, or son-in-law, something like that. And there are a number of other famous people in on it, including Seneca. According to this author, the Emperor Tiberius, in the 30s AD or CE, he put together a committee to create a new Roman religion. And this was primarily to take the sting out of the Jews, because the Jews who were being colonized by the Romans, Palestine was a Roman province at this time, dating back to something like 63 BC. And the Jews were constantly revolting, insurrecting, and just being a general nuisance or violent threat to the Roman Pax Romana. And what better way to mellow them out than psychological warfare? To create a Jewish hero who is a prince of peace, one who believes in turning the other cheek and rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and to walk an extra mile with your backpack if you're a Roman soldier. And so they came up with the idea of Jesus. They might have gotten it from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were also being written at about the same time. Or they might have gotten it from, just kind of pulled it out from their imaginations. They basically wrote themselves into the plays, into the Gospels. So Calpurnius Piso wrote himself in as Jesus. He wrote his sons in as the apostles. And apparently there were only really 3 apostles, and the rest of them were kind of shadowy characters. So we had Peter, and we had John, and we had, who's the other one? I don't know if it's Judas. Judas is in there for sure. Simon. Oh, Simon is Peter. Not sure who the Peter, John, and Simon. That's right. Oh, Simon is Peter. I don't know. It's not Matthew. Um, I honestly don't know. I don't know if it's Judas. Well, his sons are named Simonides, Justus, which is, I believe, John, and Judas. And then I'm a little bit confused, but we'll figure it out. You probably know already. But so anyway, we are reading from this book from kind of the original guy from the 20th century who came up with this theory, kind of at the same, a little bit before, but independently of this other guy, Roman Piso, who both did incredible amounts of research by reading all of these ancient texts in their original languages, not only Greek and Latin, but also Hebrew and Aramaic, and in some cases, Phoenician and Egyptian, to figure out, because especially if you read Pliny, you read Plutarch, and you read Tacitus, they, especially their private letters, they kind of tell you what's going on. And what it is really a name shell game, where the same authors are writing these things, but they're writing them under different pseudonyms, which are given by Pliny especially and Tacitus in their correspondences. And so if you you know, take this on as a detective would, and just, you know, kind of like jot down every clue, eventually you can kind of piece together what happened. And these 2 people did it independently, and they both came up with Calpurnius Piso as the author, and his children as authors of some of the later works. Pliny, for example, is Paul. He wrote the epistles, and it's interesting that Pliny, in his own work as an author under his own name, also wrote epistles. And then those were written much later, in about 100 AD. The Gospels were originally written by this committee that Tiberius formed, but they never really got off the ground, because by the time I think they were ready, Nero was already the emperor, and Nero didn't go for it. And so they waited until the year of the 4 emperors, and then eventually Vespasian came in, and he was down with the idea. And so that was in 69 AD. And so the Gospels were mostly written in that period right after that. But some of them were written much later. Revelation was way later, like 137. Hebrews was written in 140, according to this author, by the grandson named Julius, I believe. And he revealed much in the book of Revelation about who actually did this. One of the authors at least posits that this guy Julius might actually have been a good guy, whereas the rest of these guys are murder, mass murdering gay pedophiles, basically. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of disgusting, dirty jokes in these, if you know what the code is. We might go over that at some point if you can stomach that. And so right now we're let's see. We just got done. Now, I have a problem with a lot of the evidence that he presents. He presents a lot of numerical evidence of like numerology that, these ancient languages, just like English, is alphanumeric. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, blah, blah, blah. And since they couldn't really sign their names to the Gospels, they would sign their names using letters or aliases or other clues that you had to kind of have the inside track to understand who was writing these things. And so Piso had a number of different numbers that he used to identify himself. I find that much less convincing than some of the other evidence that they have. But so we'll start here. Just keep in mind that the guy who wrote this is a Jew, and so he felt that the Christian Bible is fake, but he didn't bother to say anything about the Jewish half of the Bible. Whereas the other author, Piso, believes that the Christian Bible is fake, but the Jewish Bible is also completely fake. I find that a little bit less convincing. I think that with the Old Testament, most of it is a case of plagiarism and a lot of, it's just that God only existed for the first chapter. And after that, God is replaced by God with a small g, who is some very advanced species of person who created all of us in a test tube and as slaves, or at least domestics. And a couple of them took a liking to us, though, and upgraded us genetically a few different times. And so we do have great potential, possibly more potential than they do, but we are they are light years ahead of us in terms of technology and so on and so forth. But I believe they've already left the planet, and then the planet has been taken over by a group of much more evil reptilians, and they may or may not still be here as well. But they certainly put together this kind of double-binded traps for us, that they may actually just be these very same Romans. So just that's kind of as the background. So this book is called The True Authorship of the New Testament by Abelard Reuchlin, Reuchlin, who died about 8 or 10 years ago. And this is dating back from 1979. Now, many people throughout history have known this, but he's really the first person to write about it explicitly. Like if you look at Shakespeare knew this, but had to write about it elliptically or symbolically or, using code. And many other famous authors, according to him, such as Edgar Allan Poe, C.S. Lewis, also knew the deal, knew what was going on, and they wrote it into their stories, but you have to kind of know what to look for. He alluded to one of C.S. Lewis's stories called The Inner Ring. That kind of sounds like that might be pretty revealing. But there were many other authors also, Browning and all the Frankenstein crew, the Wollstonecrafts and Tennyson, Tolstoy, Milton, Cervantes, Stevenson, Kipling, Poe, Burns, Browning, Noyes, and also a lot of the nursery rhymes and the fairy tales, the Decameron. So people have known about this, but haven't really come out with it explicitly until Reuchlin did in 1979. And since then, many other works have come out. They haven't reached the mainstream yet, but they are about to. And when they do, the evidence is going to be overwhelming, and people are going to feel pretty stupid for believing in it, because it's pretty much the same thing as believing in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy. There's absolutely no evidence for the existence of Jesus in the first century. Absolutely zero outside of the Bible. The only evidence that exists in the first century is the writings of Josephus, where he makes an aside way in like 93 AD in his book Jewish Antiquities. But Josephus is the same dude who wrote this. Arius Piso wrote under the pseudonym of Josephus, as well as writing the Gospels. And if you read Josephus's book Wars of the Jews, at the same time that you read the Gospels, you will see one parallel after another, after another, after another, until you get to the thousands. And you won't be able to deny it anymore. Most Christians can cite the name of Josephus as the secular author who also referred to the existence of Jesus. But if they actually opened up the Wars of the Jews, they would find that evidence cuts against them instead of for them. And then there was also the work of Tacitus, who mentioned him in the 2nd century, as well as Suetonius. Those were both also part of the royal family of the Caesars. Josephus claims to have been a Jew, but if you read his autobiography, but I had always thought that the New Testament was written by Josephus, but I didn't realize that Josephus was a pseudonym. I questioned his existence completely, though. I had called him Team Josephus. Like, I thought there was a whole team on this, which turns out to be right, and they went under the name of Josephus. It turns out it's the family of the Pisos writing under the oldest one, or well, his father started this work out much longer, way back with this committee in Tiberius's time, but he was executed by Nero when Nero wouldn't go for it, and they planned to assassinate him, and Nero sniffed out the plot and executed the older Piso. And so this Arius Calpurnius Piso came in, and his whole family was all in on it. But we'll just start right here. The issue for Jews is not whether Jesus was an imposter, nor whether or not he was framed. Rather, the leaders of the world have always known that this was a fictional story with a fictional hero and fictional characters, and they have inflicted 1900 years of hatred and murder playing God, because they knew their story was made up and therefore doubted God's very existence at all. I don't know about that therefore there, but Piso's successors long accused the Jews of killing Jesus, when in fact Piso himself had killed him in his own story. On to the myth of deicide, the world's leaders had their poets and writers add such other hateful lies against the Jews as the slanderous accusations of host desecration, the blood libel, the wandering Jew fable, the well poisoners, and more recently, the international bankers. Don't know about hateful lies there. There's certainly some evidence for really all those things except for the Bible stuff. The Jew became to Christian folklore and the popular mind the embodiment of Satan. And Satan was also created by a Piso here. There's really very little reference to Satan in the Old Testament. And when it is, it's not this Hollywood figure of this red demon in hell. It is more, or maybe that's coming from Dante or some other source, but it's not coming from the Bible. The Satans in the New Testament are mortal men who are obstacles and accusers, I think. And I think it's only used like 5 times in the whole Old Testament. So Satan is also a creation of Calpurnius Piso. By painting the image of the Jew as evil and as cursed by God, the leaders were able to A, explain why the Jews had rejected and killed Jesus and still then continued unwilling to accept him. B, explain why the Jews were still then being treated so badly. C, have and utilize a convenient object on which to divert the dissatisfaction of their peoples. A German general being asked at Nuremberg trials how the Holocaust events could have been permitted, replied, quote, "I am of the opinion that when for years, for decades, the doctrine is preached that Jews are not even human, such an outcome is inevitable." There's a lot of touche, though, here. The Jews do the same thing. It's all in the Talmud and everything. So they dehumanize certain other groups of people. And they certainly do get that in return. All 3 of these religions, we haven't really gotten to the Islam part, but Islam has the exact same story as Christianity with the same characters. And it's argued by this author that the whole Quran was also written by a Piso relative, much later in the whole time period, but still with the same structure and the same 10 characters written into the story, including Jesus and Mary and Satan and a couple emperors and John the Baptist and Zechariah and a few others. So sometimes it seems to exist even independent of its theological underpinnings, because modern man no longer thinks only in theological terms. The haters have shifted the evil image so it today largely rests on conspiracy instead of on deicide. The wrongs, real or imagined, of a single Jew are imputed to allegedly conspiratorial Jews as a group. The concentration camp guards and SS who murdered Jews wore belt buckles which announced, "God is with us," and attended Mass on Sunday, and when they died, they were buried under crosses. Hitler had attended a Catholic school. Years later, he would claim he was doing the church's work against the Jews. Nor has a single Nazi murderer, and even Hitler, ever been excommunicated. But no one thinks to blame all the Christians or Catholics for the Holocaust, nor should they do so. Now, there's still the issue of, these European Jews they're not Palestinian Jews. Most of them are Khazarians from Ukraine, and they converted to Judaism en masse because their king told them to in the 8th century. And that's where the conspiracy comes in, and that's where a lot of the complaints come in, is that the Jews that have been put down in Israel now they're not Palestinian. They don't have any link to Palestine. They're Europeans. And so that is and this guy who's writing this is probably a European Jew too, called Ashkenazi. And so he may or may not know this, but they don't have any connection to Palestine other than the religion, because they were converted in a much later period, after the diaspora of 135 AD. So, on the other hand, Karl Marx was converted by his father to Christianity at age of 6, was raised and schooled as a Christian, and grew up to write vile things against Jews. Yet, because he had been born a Jew, Jews as a group have been blamed for Karl Marx and for communism. That's a pretty good point. The Jews as a group have been slandered as international communists and international bankers, and recently as international Zionists. In the fictional pro-hatred and suspicion of Jews, there's a line missing or something. It goes from page 23 to 24, but something at the bottom of page 23 is missing. So it says, in the fictional pro something, and then the next line just says, hatred and suspicion of Jews still infect popular thinking everywhere. To escape from it, some Jews flee to the idealistic movements of others, some to assimilation, some even to self-hate. They are oblivious to the great secret which supports the hostile climate. Although undreamed of by them, the secret has always been known to the world's non-Jewish religious leadership and theologians. As to Islam, its holy book, the Quran, mentions Jesus in 93 different verses, places him in the line of prophets, and mentions him always as a historical person. This is even though he was Piso's fictional creation. The Korah Surah, or chapter 28, makes Pharaoh's prime minister at the time of Moses, Haman. Surah chapter 3 makes the husband of Mary, Imran. In the Bible, Amram was actually Moses' father. Again, chapter 19 makes Mary, Jesus' mother, also the sister of Aaron, who in fact was Moses' brother. This confusion, which made Jesus' mother also Moses' sister, was, if not inner circle hinting, obviously erroneous. However, there are indications that the founders of Islam too had inner circle knowledge. And here we go with the numerology again. There are 114 chapters in the Quran, because 100 is Calpurnius Piso, KP. And 14 equals 60, which is Calpurnius Piso. I can't remember how 14 equals 60 anymore, but he explained it earlier. Muhammad flies to heaven from a bridge upon a fabulous animal, described either as a winged mare or an ass. A mare is a female horse, and the horse was an allusion to Piso. The ass was an allusion to Jesus. The Quran says in chapter 4, says that the Jews did not crucify Jesus, but rather the one who was represented for him in his likeness. According to Arabs, the beautiful names of God are 99 in number, and there are 99 beads on the Muslim rosary, which are divided into 3 groups of 33 each. when the Catholic Church at Vatican II was debating to what degree it should exonerate the Jews of the charge of deicide, President Nasser of Egypt sent to the church a manuscript arguing against the exoneration. The manuscript was 600 pages in length, which is another Piso number. As to the communists, Karl Marx was a student of Bruno Bauer in a Berlin university. Bauer was the only Bible scholar who ever openly wrote that the New Testament arose from the synthesis of the ideas of Seneca and Josephus. He also believed that Jesus was a creation by the composer of the Gospel of Mark, which checks out with this man's information. So that Bruno Bauer book is called, what is it called? It was written in 1875, so way ahead of its time. But there were some other authors at that time period that at least hinted in this direction, including a guy named Ronald Syme, Symee, and James Hannay, Hannay, who kind of, they figured out the code. They couldn't talk about it explicitly. Actually, Bauer did talk about it explicitly, and he was ruined. So I think they took kind of the lesson from that and realized that maybe if they put it out in code, somebody eventually would notice, and I think a lot of people did. Ronald Syme was like at Oxford, and there may have been some others at Oxford who had figured this out, just like Shakespeare and his whole, Shakespeare was a woman, but that was at the court of Queen Elizabeth and James the First, and Christopher Marlowe was in on it, and probably quite a few others in that circle at the court. Amelia Bassano is her name as Shakespeare, and she was part of an Italian musical troupe that were Queen Elizabeth was the patron. I think they were brought over actually by Henry VIII a few generations earlier. Anyway, that's all summed up in John Hudson's book called Shakespeare's Dark Lady, and some of it is touched on also in Joseph Atwill's book called Shakespeare's Secret Messiah. In the 21st century, Joseph Atwill is kind of put together this work called Caesar's Messiah that is resurrecting these ideas of Abelard Rushlin. All right, thanks for tuning in today,